Lucas.
Broadcasting live from the nice 66-degree IRN studio here in Wisconsin. Welcome to Paying Radio. Tonight is Sunday, July 23rd, 2017. We have a treat for you tonight. We have the man himself, Stan Friedman, coming on in just a few minutes. He's standing by in very cool Canada, and it was actually cooler back here by Lake Superior tonight, but I'm with my co-host, Ken Storch. Ken booked this show for us, and I appreciate it, Ken. Thanks for reaching out to Stan. It was great for you to do that.
Oh, I'm excited about having Mr. Freeman on tonight, and looking forward to tonight's show. It should be interesting.
And Kenny, do you got any shout-outs tonight?
I do. I want to have a shout-out to Kevin Berry. I know he's tuned in, and Laura Hunter, and George, and Patty in Springfield, Missouri, and Dick in Maryland, and Rosie over in England. Rosie, thanks for joining us tonight.
Well, that's quite a long list, and I'd like to thank all my Facebook friends who have been downloading our app like crazy to listen to the voice of the fringe majority. And there's many different ways to listen to IRN. You can listen via our chat, download Inception Radio Network mobile. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio now, and we'll be going live very soon on iHeartRadio plus our podcasts. We're on TuneIn Radio, Stitcher Radio, Roku. You can listen to us anywhere. Most cars are equipped with Android operating systems. Download IRN on that car. Listen to us. And if you don't have a smartphone, for all you people out there that still use flip phones, which there are some people, you got 401-283-6700. You can listen to us on your speakerphone. You don't need internet to listen to IRN. You can call up and listen on a speakerphone. So, Kenny, many ways to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't. There's no excuses.
No excuses at all. And tonight I'm privileged. I've been watching him for quite a long time. I'm sure Ken has too. He is a legend himself. And me and Ken were talking before the show. He's more like an Elvis to us, the king of ufology research. He's done it all. Roswell, MJ12. Be sure you get your questions ready in chat. But we'd like to introduce Stan Friedman. Stan, it is an ultimate pleasure to have you on our show. Thanks for coming on tonight.
I'm delighted to be on from beautiful downtown Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, 73 miles east of beautiful downtown Holton, Maine. So I share two countries.
You're a dual citizen.
That's right, and I've got two passports.
Outstanding. Good for you. Oh, man. Hey, well, why don't we just go ahead and jump right in the middle of it? What do you say, MJ?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken. I'm going to hand it over to you. You did the pleasure of booking Mr. Stan here.
Well, Mr. Friedman, I want to tell everybody I read all of your articles in the MUFON magazine, Perceptions.
Oh, good.
I truly enjoy some of your comments, and I appreciate your humor too. So I know that sometimes it goes over like a lead balloon in the ufology, with some people being
a little sensitive. You mean, huh?
Yeah, a little thin skin. We had Kevin Randall on a couple of weeks ago. And I mentioned your name, and he got irate at me, for.
He would.
Well, we were referring to his latest book, Roswell in the 21st Century, and he was a little testy. I'm not sure exactly why, other than it may be a jealousy factor. I don't know. I mean, I respect Kevin Randall. Don't make any mistake about that, but.
Hey, he's written more than 80 books, so I got to respect anybody who can do that. But most of them are fiction, of course.
Well, I have yet to write one. I don't know that I'll ever get around to it, but.
Well, I haven't written any fiction yet. I've written. My name is on 6 nonfiction books, but at least I hope they're nonfiction.
Well, no, and MJ and I were talking. Excuse me. Prior to the show, and it's true. I think, this is my opinion, but I think you broke the whole topic of ufology wide open with your interview of Major Marcel and exposing Roswell. And I think that all the hardcore skeptics that are tuned in and listening, that if they could, any way, shape, would overturn the perception of Roswell, they'd find one piece of, evidence that would basically turn the light out on ufology, because I think Roswell is the keystone. I've said that on a number of occasions of ufology. If you can show that that Roswell was nothing more than a balloon, or some Nazi captured technology that we brought back from Europe, then the whole.
Well, it's kind of funny. I read the first book I read about UFOs way back in 1958, and I didn't hear about Roswell really until the 70s. So I was active in ufology starting pretty early, and Roswell wasn't part of the picture. I didn't know anything about Roswell until I was in the right place at the right time to get the right story, and then follow up, and everything else changed. But as a nuclear physicist, I'm concerned about facts and data and solid information, and in a sense, the difference between Kevin and me is that I have never written any fiction.
Yeah, and I think that you are a avid researcher. You obviously have an eye for detail. Like I said, I enjoy reading in the perceptions when you comment. You seem to always back it up with information where an individual can go and look it up for themselves.
That's what I tried to do. Have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear is my rule.
Oh yeah, my mom would say sometimes the only time I open my mouth is to change feet. But
that's a good line. I like that.
Yeah, and so the fact that you seem to be able to back it up, and I noticed that a lot of your critics really don't respond when you present facts and figures to them in the on the topic. They seem to be armchair quarterbacks and don't really do the research and make all kinds of accusations, but they don't have anything to back it up. And what they do, they cherry pick. They don't give you the whole picture. At least that's my interpretation. That's how I see it.
I think you're right, and this is too important a subject to leave it to fictionalizing and to hoping and wishing. I've been at this a long time, and I'm, like I say, reading the first book in 1958, and I have lived with ufology for a long time. And what I find is that people have difficulty understanding that you should get the facts in hand first. I've been to 20 archives, for example. I love archives. Somebody'd pay me, I'd spend all my time in archives. But
yeah.
Well, it goes with the story of being a scientist. It isn't enough to have an idea. It isn't enough to want to believe something is true. And, the big noises in ufology have been people, Philip Glass, fine writer, he's senior avionics editor for Aviation Week and Space Technology, but he started with the proposition all sightings can be explained, and it doesn't matter if you get your facts right, because they all have prosaic explanations. And I get a great laugh at my lectures when I show a copy of a check he had to write me for proving him wrong, flat out dead wrong, about some MJ-12 document. And, it illustrates the problem. He challenged me. This is a brief memo which was exciting. It's a memo from Bobby Cutler, Ike's National Security Advisor. And Phil said, the memo is obviously a fraud because it's done in the large pica type, but the National Security Council, whose name is on the top, only used elite type. And I've got 9 documents to prove it. And he sent copies of the 9, and he challenged me to find any genuine documents done in the same size and style type. You'd think he knew what he was talking about, wouldn't you? And so he offered me $100 each. I'll pay you $100 each up to a maximum of 10. And he gave all the criteria that it had to meet requirements and so forth. And first thing I did was look at my files, and I had more than 20 documents done from the National Security Council in pica type, but they didn't meet all his criteria. Only 2 did. So I knew I was going to the Eisenhower Library, so I went there. I live on the East Coast. The Eisenhower Library is in the middle of the country, So I don't just, spend 2 minutes in a car to get there. Anyway, I went there. I dug out 14 documents that met all his criteria, made copies, sent him an invoice for $1,000. He said a maximum of 10 that he would pay for. And he paid me, and then he got madder than heck when I published a copy of his check.
Rightly so.
And, the funny thing is, I didn't find this out until a little later, because I know Phil isn't stupid. How could he be so far off? I found out he'd never been to the Eisenhower Library. I spent weeks there. How could he make a challenge like that without having any facts in hand?
Oh, he was firing blames.
Yeah, and as another example of thing you got to watch out for in this field, one of the other big debunkers, actually preceding class because he was older, was Dr. Donald Howard Menzel, Harvard University professor of astronomy. He wrote 3 anti-UFO books. And I couldn't understand. I had one run-in with him, and it wasn't friendly. And I didn't understand what the heck was going on because he was too smart to have done all this accidentally, so to speak. And then I found a mention of a legal situation in somebody else's papers. This is about the MJ-12 stuff. And something about Dr. Menzel. And it was a letter from a lawyer thanking Vannevar Bush for all his work in getting Menzel cleared and allowed to keep his security clearance. And I'm wondering, what the heck? Why would Menzel have a security clearance? You don't need a security clearance to teach astronomy at Harvard or any place else, as far as I know. So I followed up with the attorney who had written a letter thanking Vannevar Bush and found out, there's 1,000 pages in the Menzel papers at Harvard. Menzel was dead already. So I had to get permission from 3 different people, I'll cut to the chase, to see Menzel's papers, and I did that. Written permission, mind you. Got a little grant from the Fund for UFO Research, went there. The first thing I looked at there was, I didn't know where to look because I knew that most of his UFO stuff was not at Harvard. It was at the American Philosophical Society Library in Philadelphia. And first thing I looked at was a folder JFK. Wonder what that's all about. Well, Menzel and John F. Kennedy, the president, he knew him before that, were good old buddies. Knew each other very well, called each other by first names, and even had breakfast together in Cambridge area. And in one of his first letters that I ran across, he mentions that Kennedy had already just been elected, that there's one area where I may be able to be of assistance to you. It's with regard to the National Security Agency. I've had a longer continuous association with them, 30 years, of anybody. When we are properly cleared to each other, I can tell you more. Wow! What the heck was this? So I did a lot of digging, and to make a long story short, it turns out Menzel did work for the NSA for over 30 years. He did all kinds of classified work. He did some work for the CIA. None of this was known on the outside. When I found out, he was dead already. So, but I had the paperwork to prove it. And there were people in ufology who told me, come on, Stan, he couldn't have led a double life. I pointed out that Burgess, Philby, and McLean were 3 Russian spies who worked for British intelligence for years and years. Many people lead double lives. But finding out about Menzel was a real shocker. I didn't like him when he was alive, but then I respected him for doing his country's work, his country's classified work.
Right.
So it means you got to look carefully and long and hard, not jump to conclusions, and not make up fictional plots, if you will, to explain this, that, or the other thing.
Let me ask you a question. Why do you think Menzel and Phil Klass? I had a heated discussion with Phil Klass in Denver one time at a symposium. He showed up and he had buttons all over his suit jacket. It says, "Talk to me. I'm an abductee." He had another button that says, "I communicate with the aliens on Venus," and stuff like that. Okay.
Wow.
And he made a comment that Betty Cash and Vicky Landrum, the only reason why they came forward with their story was to gain notoriety and publicity. And I had investigated the Cash-Landrum incident by John Schuessler.
Yeah.
And he asked me to do a follow-up investigation. I interviewed those two ladies for almost 8 hours. I sat in Betty Cash's house on her couch. I found her to be incredibly intelligent and very honest. I truly believe that they encountered something out there in Texas. I don't know what it was, but I truly believe that they certainly didn't do it. It affected their health. Okay, whatever they encountered physically affected them. And I lit into Phil Klass. I said, "You haven't talked to these ladies." And I said, "For you to make a comment like that," I said, "I think it's irresponsible on your part." And we were sitting in the bar area of where the symposium was, and a group of people got around us, and I think they thought it was they could feel the heat coming off of me because I was very passionate about the fact that these two ladies were honest and they didn't make this up. Okay, and I said, "Mr. Klass," I said, "you don't even know," but I said it affected the very health of these ladies, and ultimately it killed them. They died as a result of the radiation poisoning that they were exposed to.
And there was the grandson, Colby.
Colby, correct? Yeah. It scarred him not only physically, Stanton, but emotionally.
Sure.
I think he was 8-9 years old, and whatever occurred out there scared the hell out of him and affected him emotionally.
And as you know, John Schuessler is an outstanding engineer, very responsible individual.
Yes.
And somebody I would trust with my life, I think. For a very long time.
I told John, I said he did such a good job investigating the Cash-Landrum. It was a hell of a research investigation. I mean, he crossed his T's and dotted his I's, and I was thoroughly impressed. And I found that whatever those two ladies happen upon out there in Texas, I'm 100% believe that it happened to him, that it was a real life. Well, what was interesting, I interviewed the doctor. I think his name was Anderson. He was one of 3 or 4 in the world that's recognized on radiation poisoning. In fact, our government sent him to Chernobyl when they had the meltdown over there to assist the Russians. And I interviewed him in his office, and he was befuddled. I remember him sitting back in his chair and folding his arms, and he said, called me a detective. I was honored by that. But he said, "Detective," he said, "it really mystifies me how these two ladies got irradiated out there in Texas." And I said, "Are we sure that it was?" He said, "It was classic radiation poisoning." And I said, "Well, how bad was it?" He said, "It would have been equivalent to being within several miles outside when the bomb at Hiroshima went off." He said, "You would have been irradiated." And he said these ladies had the classic symptoms: the blistering, the fever, the hair falling out, the nausea, the sickness.
Yep.
And he just happened to be in the emergency room when they brought in Vicky Landrum Betty Cash. It was Betty Cash they brought into the emergency room in the Houston hospital, and he just happened to be there. And the emergency doctors were trying to figure out what was wrong with him, and he recognized it right away, that it was radiation sickness.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
I hadn't heard that part of the story before. I'm glad to talk to somebody who had that firsthand contact with them.
Oh yeah, and we did a show on it. It was on the unexplained. They did a documentary on the Betty Cash, Cash-Landrum incident, and it was just amazing. That to me it was anyway. And then to have somebody come along like Phil Klass and make a statement like that, it really infuriated me, because he never talked to the ladies. He didn't even know anything about the case, other than the fact that it made national news and there had been a documentary done. That's all he knew about it, really.
Well, remember that the basic rules for debunkers like Klass were: 1, don't bother me with the facts, my mind's made up. 2, if you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's
absolutely.
3, do your research by proclamation. Investigation is too much trouble, and nobody will know the difference anyway. So he followed those rules pretty well.
He did.
It irked the heck out of him when I was able, when he had to pay me that money, and then when I published it, he threatened to sue me because I included a copy of his check. And
oh boy!
I told him, Phil, you sent me a check. I Xeroxed it. I took the check to the bank. They cashed it. I can do whatever I damn please with that Xerox.
Thank you.
I did take out a couple of his bank account numbers, so that
right,
got to be a decent guy, even though he doesn't deserve it. But no, it's amazing. It's kind of like, look, I've taken on the names. He and I debated on a radio station in New York, and I got by far the big part of the vote from the audience. And then Dr. Seth Shostak and I, who's a much easier person to get along with, he's from the SETI community, we debated on coast-to-coast radio, and I got 57% of the vote, he got 33% of the vote, and 10% said, I don't know who won. But there are certain rules. I was in high school debating, and one rule is you can't make up things. You got to deal with facts.
Right.
And also, we live in a society that depends on evaluation of testimony, whether it's in a court of law or there are other situations where you have to get the facts straight. And, whether you're selling property and doing all kinds of things. So we have well-established procedures, and sometimes we have to say we don't know. Okay, that's the way it goes. And you got to ask the right questions. The question isn't, are all UFOs alien spacecraft? The question is, are any?
It only takes one.
Well, that's right. And as a physicist, I'm accustomed to dealing with things where there's a big disparity. But, uranium-235, 0.7%. Hardly anything worth talking about. But if you want to build an atomic bomb, you got to enrich uranium to maybe 80-90%. And yes, you start off with very little, and you work at it. The United States, a lot of people don't realize, the United States during World War II built a gaseous diffusion plant that was a mile long, and you pump uranium hexafluoride gas through tiny holes in nickel plates, mile long. And because U-235 is a little lighter than U-238, it goes through a little quicker. And so then you take it out at one end and put it back in and keep doing it. We were using 5% of all the electricity produced in the United States at that time to separate that isotope in secret. So the fact that it was only 0.7% to begin with is beside the point. We needed it. We figured out a way to get it. Spent a hell of a lot of money. and did it.
Yeah.
And I was in radiation shielding was my big thing, working on nuclear airplanes and nuclear power plants for space and all that sort of stuff. And you very quickly learn that there are enormous differences between isotopes of the same element. And so it matters to use a little more of this instead of that one. You have to deal with the real world the way it is. And so, like I say, most sightings can be explained. That's about as useful as telling the basketball coach, most people aren't 7 feet tall, buddy. He says, I don't care about most people. Give me one,
That's right.
Give me one.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That and I think, you look at the number of cases that come through just in the last since let's say since 1945. When Kenneth Arnold had his sighting to present day.
47, June 24th, 1947.
47, Ken, you got that wrong that last time with Kevin. It's 47.
Did I?
Yeah. Kevin proved you. Kevin got on you about that one.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And Stanton got on me again.
There you go. That's two of them. That's two. Yeah.
Well, actually, I did it on purpose. I just wanted to test his memory and see if...
Hey, next week I turn 83, buddy.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Well, happy birthday.
I am old. I've got an excuse if I don't get it right.
Hey, well, I don't feel so bad then. I thought I was old. But, if you take a look at all those cases up to the present day, and all of the, and there's some sensational ones, and hell, there's probably a bunch of them we don't even know about. But out of all of that voluminous data, we only need one. And I mean, you refer to it as the cosmic Watergate. I like that.
Yes.
Okay, because I think you're right. I think there's a number of cases that I think you can point to that demonstrate that ET has been here, is coming here, and I'm one of those people that believe that at least one race continues to be here. And with all of that information and all that data, why? Here's my question, where I'm leading up to: why would people like Phil Klass and Menzel? They have to know. Stanton, they have access to the same information that we do. So why would they do that? Or do you think they're government?
Well, like I say, with Menzel, he worked with the NSA for 30 years, and I have it in writing. He wrote Jack Kennedy about that, and so I can understand Menzel. And as a matter of fact, we tangled once. In person, well, on the phone anyway. I was speaking at Harvard a number of years ago, and I called him when I was on campus a little early, and I had no idea whether the sponsor, an engineering alumni group, not the student activities office, I had no idea whether they had done any publicity besides to their own members or not. So I called Menzel and gave him my name. "Oh, I know all about you," he said. That surprised me. I've seen letters. I said, "Oh, you saw my congressional testimony next to yours." I've seen letters and memos. I didn't find out what that meant for 40 years. It turns out Ed Condon had given him copies of letters that I had sent Condon. But he said to me, "You can't be a scientist and believe in flying saucers," at which I laughed. I couldn't help it. And he started to rant and rave. I said, "Dr. Menzel, I didn't call to argue with you. I called out of courtesy. I was speaking on your campus. I wanted to make sure you knew I was going to be speaking at 8 o'clock at the whatever the name of the hall was. Oh, well, of course I won't be there." I didn't know at that time that he had done all this classified work for the NSA and the CIA and all kinds of other people. He was in naval intelligence during the war. So I changed my attitude about him. He died along the way. He was doing a job for his country. Okay, I can handle that. So I can understand him. I never did find what agency Phil Klass was working for, if he was. But I felt that there had to be something going on in the background there, and I don't know what it was. Now, there are suggestions. There's one book, the Fortec Conspiracy, which is loosely covered up truth, and he portrays Phil as, I mean, it was obvious Phil he was talking about, the author, as homosexual. And I wondered whether there wasn't some blackmailing going on in the background. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and I mean, that may very well be a possibility. I know that I got into a heated discussion with Richard Hall, and he was associated with NICAP.
Yes.
And I made a statement. We were in a hotel room in a lobby, and I said, well, if I was in charge of a government agency, pick one of the alphabet boys, FBI, CIA, NSA, or whatever, and I knew that the topic of UFOs was a serious matter, that it needed to be taken seriously, although, the government got out of it, apparently, or so they say. But I would infiltrate organizations like MUFON or NICAP.
APRO, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And he took a defensive position with me, and I mean, it got really heated.
Really?
So I knew I touched a nerve, and I'm not so sure that he knew about it or may have been associated with it. I don't have anything to support that, but I know that I touched a nerve because he took a real his whole facial expression and his posture changed dramatically.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million, what color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo!
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
And I sensed that the nerve was exposed. And I believe that to be true. Why wouldn't you do that? Because you're going to have...
You would, if it's important,
absolutely.
Which obviously it is, or they wouldn't say some of the ridiculous things they've said and take the measures that they've taken to confuse, try to defuse, to misrepresent. It must be important if they're doing that. So, let me give you an example of that. When people may think I'm just making big noises, but one of the important moments for me in my search for truth about UFOs was stumbling across a copy of Project Blue Book Special Report number 14 at the University of California, Berkeley Library. I'd already read 10 books. This is about 1961. I'd read about 10 books, and none of them had mentioned this. And here we have this huge study. And the version included a press release that went out when it was completed in the mid-50s. And in the press release, we have the following statement from the Secretary of the Air Force, mind you. Not just any dink, And he said, on the basis of this study, which did not give the title of the report, Special Report 14, if some reporter had seen that, he said, what happened to 1 through 13? We've never heard anything about them. Oh, well, they're all classified. You're not entitled. Anyway, the quote was, on the basis of this study, we believe that no objects such as those properly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. Now, that sounds like that really takes care of the matter, doesn't it? The trouble is, I had a copy of the report, which didn't, incidentally, give the title of the author, the name of the author, didn't say that the work was done under the auspices of the Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio, a very well-respected research and development firm. I know I had professional dealings with them. Now, you look in the report, and it's chock full of graphs, tables, charts, maps, loaded with data. You look in the report, and you find out that the unknowns weren't 3%. They were 21.5%, which sure isn't 3% rounded off. They had a quality evaluation of all the sightings. You find that the better the quality, the more likely to be unexplainable.
Right.
They asked an obvious question. They had all this data. They said, is there really any difference between the unknowns, the only ones we're interested in, and the knowns? Let's do a statistical cross-comparison, a chi-square analysis for any mathematicians out there. They looked at things like appearance, size, color, shape, speed, that sort of thing, 6 different characteristics. They found that the probability that the unknowns were just misknowns was less than 1%. In other words, not even close. They also found that duration of observation was longer for the unknowns than for the knowns. And they had a separate category called insufficient information. So the notion that the sightings were just the ones for which there wasn't enough data was totally false. These are flat-out lies from the Secretary of the Air Force. Now, I'm not saying somebody else didn't write them for him. You know, he may have known nothing. But that's what he said. That is clear and unambiguous misrepresentation to the public from the Secretary of the Air Force. It's one of the things that really turned me on. I don't like being lied to.
Yeah, you and me both.
I had a security clearance. Sometimes you have to tiptoe around the truth a little bit, but that's not the same as lying. Or
and you know, just to dovetail, I mean that's kind of like in your face lie. Okay, I mean it's one thing. It's one thing to stretch the truth or be evasive in your answer. Okay, but to just come out and flat out in your face lie.
Yeah,
that's what irritates me.
That's what turned me on. I mean,
Sure.
It made me angry. Again, I was young and bushy-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Right.
And I expected better from my government as a scientist. You know, I don't expect people to lie to me. And the work that I was doing, and I worked in radiation shielding for nuclear airplanes, for fission rockets, for fusion rockets. Nuclear power plants of all kinds. I was interested in facts and data. And as a matter of fact, funny story. About 2 weeks before we were supposed to test our nuclear rocket engine, Westinghouse Astronuclear Lab in Pittsburgh, the guys come to me from the projects and say, I was working on radiation shielding for this system, Stan, can you give us a better handle on the heating and the control vanes? We don't really want to melt them, but we don't have any data because it's hard to calculate that. The geometry is tough and all this sort of thing. So, okay, I'll see what I can do. We had a mock-up system. I talked to the people down there, 15 miles away. I set up a bunch of experiments, and within 3 days, we had data that seemed to indicate they were not in trouble. It was okay. And then we ran the test, and I suddenly realized, gee whiz, if this thing melts, they're going to blame me. And I was kind of worried, because there are implications here. We asked you to get us data, and you did, and you're obviously wrong,
Mr. Friedman, you believe, and I do, that something extraordinary crashed in 1947 out there in Roswell.
Actually near Corona.
Right.
But yes.
And I've heard all of the explanations from like the Air Force. Well, and let me, before going any further, one of the things that Kevin and I got into a heated discussion about, the Roswell Daily Record the next day says that the RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell, and he qualified that in his book, Roswell in the 21st Century. He said, well, flying saucer didn't mean alien craft back in 1947. There were a number of articles written by journalists that didn't necessarily equate flying saucer flying saucer to ET technology. And I said,
yes.
Well, the problem, Kevin, I said, though, in the front page, in the body of the newspaper, it refers to it as a flying disc. And I said, if you put flying saucer and flying disc together, I don't care if it's 1947 or 2017, people are going to equate that with something that's not on this planet or comes from this planet. And he goes, oh no, that's incorrect. And I disagree. I think if in 1947, if you'd have told somebody that you saw a flying saucer, that they would think that you saw something exotic.
I hate to disagree with you. I couldn't find any coverage in those early days, and I looked. A lot of people think that article was only in the Roswell paper, but it was in the Chicago Daily News, it was in the Sacramento Bee, the Spokane Chronicle, and a whole bunch of other papers. It really was from Chicago West. The original story came out too late for the morning papers, for the East and for the East Coast papers.
Right.
But you don't find people talking about little green men, aliens. None of that shows up at that time. Flying saucer, because Kenneth Arnold said they moved as a saucer would if you skipped it across the water. So it was a descriptive of shape, but not source. In other words, not from aliens or anything like that.
No, that's a point well made. Yeah.
I've looked at those early papers, partly because I had a guy who wound up being a congressman who told me, well, it couldn't have been a big story because it appeared only in that little tiny Roswell paper. And I had sent the station copies of headline articles from other papers, much bigger. Every paper is bigger than the Roswell paper. So in that case, I have to agree that flying saucer didn't mean alien. But that's beside the point, really. And also RAAF, somebody tried to tell me that's Royal Australian Air Force, Stan, and I said, no, it's Roswell Army Airfield.
Air Force. Yeah, airfield. Yeah.
Yeah, people make mistakes. But remember again that Kevin, writing fiction, has the luxury of making plots come out any way he wants them to. And I envy him that. Let me give you an example to see the difference here. He said that the MJ-12 documents are phony because it says Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter in the briefing for Eisenhower, and I say that's not the point at all, because we use generic ranks for all kinds of people. It's standard practice. And when I went to the Eisenhower Library, I dug out a bunch of memcons, they're called, memoranda communications, something like that, that General Goodpaster wrote for Eisenhower. He was his staff secretary, and he was a general. And he listed at the beginning of each of these things the attendees, always using only generic ranks. Admiral, general, not rear admiral, not the lieutenant general, but standard generic ranks. But he called himself General Goodpaster, but he was really only a brigadier general. But he signed it Brigadier General. But there's Kevin saying that the biggest reason for saying the document's phony, and Kevin had 20 years he worked for the military.
Yeah, he was a colonel.
I give him credit for that.
Right,
he knows about the military, and my timing didn't happen that way. Long story, but so that was a typical example. It sounds good. It's true. He was not a full admiral. He was a rear admiral. But that's no excuse to say the document's phony, because all the ranks were generic ranks of those guys on MJ-12.
Well, and I'm just kind of a flat-foot cop, but it makes sense to me. I operate under the KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid. But it makes sense. It makes sense to me that if something as important, something as critical as having a saucer-type craft fall into your lap, that the government wouldn't put together a special panel, a special organization in order to deal with it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of examples of where the government has done just that in terms of putting together a special panel to deal with something, whether it's the Cuban Missile Crisis or whatever. The president needs advisories. He needs a panel to advise him, and if something as important and exotic as this, makes sense that they would put together an MJ-12 type of panel and how to deal with it.
I'm in full agreement with that, and I've written a whole book, Top Secret / Majic, about MJ-12, And that's one of the points that I made. We had a lot of questions that we needed answers for. What do these guys want? Where are they from? What are their intentions? The Cold War was heating up. They're little guys. Maybe they're working with the Chinese. Who knows? It could not. And what are you going to tell the public? We just had the world's worst war, killed 50 million of our own kind, we nice earthlings did, destroyed 1,700 cities, dropping bombs all over the place. And we're going to tell the people, oh, we thought you'd like to know. You don't have enough troubles. A good part of the world was starving still in 47. But there are these alien visitors, and we don't know what they want, where they're from, but we thought you'd like to be aware of that. I mean,
and we can't do anything about them, so to get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, President Truman couldn't possibly do that. And, you know, when we talk about secrecy, people forget he didn't know about the Manhattan Project.
No.
And yet, and he had been in the Senate and was vice president. And he didn't find out. He got briefed 13 days after Roosevelt died, because he had to make the decision to drop the atomic bomb.
Well, there were thousands of people that worked on the Manhattan Project. They didn't have any idea what the hell they were working on. I mean, they were compartmentalized, and they had a little piece of the puzzle, but very few people knew the whole picture.
That's right, and it's a good thing they didn't. You know.
Oh yeah.
As it was, sometimes we make mistakes. A guy who was head of the Manhattan Project, Leslie Groves, was asked in 1948, how long do you think it'll be before the Russians have the atomic bomb? Because the Cold War was heating up, certainly. And he hemmed and hawed and said, well, look, they lost 20 million people during the war. Their industrial capacity was badly hurt. They don't have a system for dropping it, for delivering it. It'd probably take about 8 years. Would you believe that was in 48? In 1949, the Russians tested their first vehicle, caught us flat-footed. And about the method for delivering, we had left the B-29 over there, used wartime Lend-Lease, you know, and they had made Chinese copies of it, if you want to put it that way. Remember how we used to talk about Japanese, I guess it was.
Their Russian backfire bomber, what they called, was a duplicate, basically, of the B-29. I mean, they copied it.
You understand that we were very much concerned. We didn't even have a radar net around the United States. What's the need? What's the rush? We got the Ground Observer Corps. They can see the Russian planes coming, except the Russians don't have any planes, so nothing to worry about. You know,
right.
President Truman was in a difficult situation. He certainly couldn't go public with alien spacecraft, unknown objective, unknown source. Couldn't possibly do that. The world was in terrible shape at the time. It was the last thing we needed. And also, maybe we can figure out how these things work so we can build better airplanes. And how can we put anything out on the table if the other guy doesn't put anything out on the table, you know? So he knows what we know, and we don't know what he knows. I'm not blaming them for keeping it secret. I'm not happy about the Secretary of the Air Force lying. I don't mean that. But you had a situation which required some careful thought and real determination of where do we want to go with this. You know, how much danger is the planet in? That's not a trivial question.
No, it's not. And I mean, and what are their intentions? I mean, why are they here? Okay, I mean, are they interested in us or the planet itself? And if it's the planet themselves, then they may just sweep us aside like a broom and said, we don't need these Earthlings. Well, that kind of leads me up to my next question. What about today? Why still put the facade and continue the lie? I get it. Once you tell a lie, you got to tell another lie to cover up that lie or perpetuate it. But I mean, now we're into 2017, where we've got Mars landers. People are talking about going back to the moon and stuff. So why perpetuate it? Why not? Basically, I don't mean necessarily walk out on the stage and go, "Okay, guys, here's a story," but at least leak out the necessary information so that it's out in the open and that we can have an honest debate and discussion. Why?
Well, I think one primary reason is what I mentioned before about technology. Every Air Force would like to be able to duplicate the flying characteristics of a flying saucer. Right? Up, down, back, forth, silent.
Right.
Very high speed, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we can't put out on the table what we know if our enemies don't put out what they know. Why should we give them what we have and they won't give us what they have? Secondly, there is real concern on this planet. We don't know how to make the transition from a nationalistically oriented planet. I don't know, 195 countries? I don't know what the latest number is, but it's a number close to 200. There is no earthling control system. People in power want to stay in power.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people derive a lot of pleasure from having the power of being head of or a big shot in a country. So, the fact that we have a screwed up system. Look, the military budget last year was $1 trillion. That's for planet Earth. United States about half of that, incidentally. How do we go from that to a world government? We don't know how to do that. How many kids died of starvation last year?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give a damn. We got we Earthlings have $1 trillion worth of military going on.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So we are also, there's a religious side of the story too. I've had people ask me, did Jesus die to save them? And what if not? I've talked to fundamentalists who insist that the world was created in 4004 BC on a Thursday afternoon, I think it was.
Whoa.
Who are totally who was it? Jerry Falwell, I guess, said that all the intelligent life in the universe is right here on planet Earth.
Oh man, I hope not.
Well, let's hope the good Lord can do better than that. But
no kidding.
But what I'm saying is, we're not very good at transitioning from one situation to a very, very different situation. And so, where do we go from here? And I'm not saying we and the Russians and Chinese haven't exchanged information. Maybe we have. For all I know, it's possible. But we have a planet in trouble. On the one hand, we're growing, we're getting smarter. On the other hand, you have to say, how stupid can you get to spend all your resources that way instead of feeding those starving kids?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and if you look at history, whenever we've had a technological breakthrough, whether it's the airplane or the automobile or internet or whatever, we have a tendency to weaponize it. Okay,
You're right.
We split the atom, and the first thing we did is make a bomb out of it. I mean,
what else would you do?
And so that type of technology, I guess, or that type of mindset is what I was looking for.
Yeah,
but we're going to take this technology and we're going to put it into the military-industrial complex, and therefore we can crush our enemies that much faster and that much thoroughly. And that's a sad state of affairs, really, when you stop and think about it. When we're at this stage, that we have the ability probably to solve the starvation problem, be able to conquer a lot of diseases. Okay, if we put our resources on it. But when you spend a third or maybe half of your budget in weaponizing the technology, you're not going to do it. And that's the scare. I mean, we just built an aircraft carrier, $13 billion. Is that
what that one cost?
The Gerald Ford, the USS Gerald Ford.
Wow.
Yeah, $13 billion. And I just kind of shook my head because I'm one of those people that think that the aircraft carrier is going by the wayside like the battleship. I think it's a dinosaur, and it'll be proven to be not the. My father-in-law, he's deceased now, but he was a nuclear submarine commander. He commanded the USS Pogey, and he told me that the most dangerous weapon platform on the planet, bar none, is the submarine. And that and this is back in the 90s when we were having this conversation.
That's because you can't find them, you understand.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but he back in the 90s. I mean, he was retired from the U.S. Navy, but we got into this discussion. He's the one that said the aircraft carrier is a dinosaur, and I go, really, George? And he goes, oh yeah. He said we can find the aircraft carrier anytime we want. He says, but we can't find that submarine anytime we want.
Exactly right. But there is another part of that. Remember that the aircraft carrier can operate for 18 years without refueling.
Right. He's right.
And when you're a sea captain, being able to forget about the gas tank is a very big thing, because you can go full speed now, forever.
Well, but that's true with the submarine. I mean, it can.
Oh yes, the submarine. Yeah. I'm not knocking the nuclear submarine. The fact that nobody knows where it is, so mutually assured destruction. You're gonna drop a bomb at me, I'll get back at you, buddy.
That's right. Yeah, and with the technology, I just read an article, MJ, here about 3 days ago. The Russians are planning on building a 30,000 division company of robots. They want 30,000 battle-hardened robots.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm one of those that I think that it's going to come to pass. I mean, computers and robots is like peanut butter and jelly or beer and pizza. They just go together. And the military is not going to pass up an opportunity to weaponize that technology. All we have to do is look at the drones.
Gentlemen, guess what? We did miss our first break because the discussion was just too good to cut off, but we're going to take a 5-minute break. You're listening to Stanton Friedman tonight on Paying Radio, heard on the Inception Radio Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Paying Radio. Tonight we have on the man himself, the king. He looks a little like Elvis. He's got a beard, maybe, sort of a beard, but Stanton Friedman's with us tonight. Yep. We thank him for being on. Now, Stan, another good case with a lot of good evidence is Shag Harbor. Are you close to Shag Harbor? Yes. How far are you away?
Well, it's let's see, over a 4-hour drive.
Okay.
I've been there.
Okay, yeah. Tell us.
And I've talked to some of the witnesses, and it's a good case, partly because the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, got involved right after it happened. There were witnesses to the darn thing going down in the water, and they thought it was an airplane. So we got to do something to save the poor people in the airplane that are going to drown in all that water.
Right.
And so they were on site very quickly, and it didn't find any airplane and stuff. And it was a good case. There's a sensitive element there because that's an area, south border of Nova Scotia there, where the Russian submarines go by and other places, other military craft. And so it's not a place that we like to talk a lot about, either government, the United States or Canada. And so they didn't find something, but the witnesses, of course, were younger, and many of them are still around. I'm satisfied. They don't have a good museum there.
Right.
Much of a museum. It's unlike Roswell. I was there 3 weeks ago, and my goodness, there were over 7,000 visitors to Roswell. And considering that Roswell's in the middle of nowhere,
right,
it's not on the way to anywhere. I sold all my books. It's a proof that the people from all over the world are interested because they come from all over the world in Roswell. And so Shag Harbor isn't like that. It doesn't have that kind of attractive power, and it doesn't have the freedom for some of the discussions that have taken place because of, like I say, this sensitive underwater, all that sort of stuff. But no, it's a good case. And look, the Aztec case is an excellent book by Scott Suzanne Ramsey about that. They dug out all kinds of information that nobody had before them. Partly, it's one of the factors that get into these cases. Suzanne's family is from around there, so people aren't as ready in small towns to talk to strangers. But if you got family and you know people, it's much easier to get them to talk. So they found witnesses. They found a lot of stuff that nobody else had found. But there was a crash in the plains of San Augustine. What can I tell you? There have been crash saucers, many of them.
Well, you know, one of the things I run into a lot when I talk and discuss with people, and they kind of roll their eyes and they go, come on, Ken. They have the technology to come here, and then they get here, and what happens? They crash. And I look at them and I say, well, let me ask you something. How long do you think we've been building boats? I said, I think we've got it down pretty good that we know how to build a boat and keep it afloat. But I said, they still sink.
Oh, yeah. Ken, Lake Superior sucked up many of them. Like more.
Oh, yeah. And you know, I said, you know, we've been flying for a little over 100 years. I said, I think we understand lift and how the aircraft works, but I said, they still crash. You know, I said, so what makes you think that, you know, they're not infallible? Okay, I mean, they whoever or whatever, you know, if it's a machine, at some point in time, it has the possibility of breaking down or, you know, in our case, pilot error. I mean, what makes you think that they're so perfect that they don't make mistakes?
Or the unexpected.
Hey,
I think that there was probably a mid-air collision for the...
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, you know, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Plains of San Augustine and Roswell, that I found that there was a radar set on because they were going to launch from White Sands. And back those days, guys, they were vacuum tube radar systems, and you had to leave them on. Otherwise, you got a warm-up time. And so here you are in the middle of nowhere, and you've got a pilot and a wingman, aliens, of course, and they come across this damn radar beam that's sitting out there.
Well, you know, that's
rotating.
You brought that up, Ken. I mean, as a theory.
Yeah, let me dovetail here a little quick on that. I asked my father-in-law. I said, you know, George, I said, when you're underwater, did you ever track any unknowns? And he got a real serious look at him. He said, all the time, and that's all I'm going to say about it. And he knew where I was coming from. And one day, I'm at the house. He was retired there on the island of Oahu, and I'm sitting on the beach, looking at the bikinis walking by on the beach. And not that I would do that, but all of a sudden he walks up behind me and he hands me a book. He goes, the book stays in the house, but he said it was written by my academy classmate. He said the Navy tried to keep him from publishing it, and at that time it was still being argued in the courts. But he had one of the original copies, and he says, I think you'll find chapter 11 interesting. So I went right to chapter 11, and what it was about was the Navy during World War II. The Japanese had a nasty habit of popping out behind thunderstorms and engaging the U.S. Navy. And in the Battle of Okinawa, the Navy had to put destroyers out every 26 miles because the kamikazes would fly under the because of the curvature of the planet, would fly under the radar beam, and then at the last moment they would pop up and dive bomb into the ship. So the Navy was trying to develop over-the-horizon radar, and they were trying to see if they could pierce thunderstorms. And Stanton, guess where all this testing was going on? Down in White Sands, New Mexico.
Oh, I should have known, of course.
Yeah, and you know, for him to tell me, I think it made me think that maybe, because if I'm right, there was a horrendous electrical storm that was moving across New Mexico into Texas. in July of that year. And I could just see the Navy turning on their high-potency microwave radar to see if they could penetrate that thunderstorm. And they didn't know that there was 2 craft up there. And, you know.
Oh, I love it. I think that I think that's so true, because it's the unexpected. You know, we can talk about drones and robots and all this kind of stuff, but behavior is still something we can't go 100% on. Things are going to happen, you know. And so that's what you have to look out for. The fact that they can get here from someplace else doesn't mean that they don't spill coffee on their necktie, you know.
Right.
I don't know where that came from.
But that's a point well made. I mean, we have a tendency to think that just because they have a technological leap on us that they're infallible, and I don't see that at all. You know,
no,
I mean,
and we have weather on this planet. This is not a planet which is able to control its weather to avoid all kinds of bad sequences of things happening. Look at the hurricanes, look at the typhoons, you know, everything happening at just the wrong time, you know, when you're going to take off or land or whatever. So there are unpredictable things, like it or not.
And to think for 1 minute that that's not going to impact a alien race that comes here, it would be ludicrous. I mean, they would have to.
I'm going to answer this phone for just a second.
Yep.
Go ahead.
That's a good point, Ken.
Well, yeah, I just think that you know, to be able to think, you know, for I guess naysayers or skeptics to make that claim just doesn't hold water. It doesn't wash. I mean, because we're making a big assumption that they're infallible, that they're perfect.
Yeah, and of course we're not perfect by any means. You know that, definitely.
Well, hell no,
Yeah,
and that their equipment is not going to malfunction.
Right.
You know, so I just don't see how any of that, you know, holds water when it comes to, you know, well, when they come here from millions of miles, and we don't know that they come from billions of miles away either.
Right.
I mean, they could be just outside of our solar system. Like I said, they could be nomadic, and like Stanton said, that, you know, they've got a mothership, and you know, they're just a few hours away by flight at their craft. And it doesn't necessarily mean that their technology is infallible, that it doesn't make mistakes.
Oh, they're probably building right inside the earth. They've been here for thousands of years, and
sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay, Stan.
Yeah, we were just commenting on, you know, the fact that you know, just because they have a technological jump on us doesn't mean that they don't make mistakes and that their equipment doesn't break down.
That's right.
You know, I mean, it just doesn't. I don't understand how a person would really believe that. Well, I can't see them coming all the way here and crashing. Well, we don't know what the circumstances were that caused the crash.
The space shuttle crashed. Very sophisticated system, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, it was.
Oh yeah. Hey, you know, you look at the Thresher. The submarine that went down back in the 60s because of a water pipe, and it flooded the forward compartments, and you know, George, my father-in-law, said that they didn't anticipate on the flooding of the forward compartment when it was doing a test dive, when the water pipe broke. They didn't have any shutoff valves to shut the water off. It was an oversight on the you know, architectural table when they were drawing it up. So yeah, I don't know. You know, we make mistakes. Why don't they? And so yeah, I see them having the ability to crash. You know, you bet. I don't for a minute think that that's not a plausible explanation, that they're not that they're perfect. No,
I agree with you. And you know, what we have to worry about here is that there's been, the planet's 4 billion years old. The galaxies are at least 13 billion years old. Who knows what all has gone on? We haven't perfected perfection yet, and I don't expect that we will.
No, I don't either.
Right.
You know, anybody who thinks there must be a perfect planet out there, the essence of humanity is not perfection. It's being able to deal with the problems that come along.
Right.
I didn't mean that to sound so profound.
That's how we adapt to the problems, yeah.
Yeah,
come up with solutions.
Look, the notion, if you deal with the debunkers, you find that none of them have solid cases. No, I'm serious. I've debated with them and dealt with them, and they haven't done their homework. That's the first thing.
Oh, I get it. I get it. No, I was just going to say I get infuriated when I hear academia said that there is no scientific evidence to prove that flying saucers exist. And I just shake my head and I go, well, Project Identification by Professor Harley Rutledge, if you read it, that was a pretty, back in the early 70s, that was a pretty scientific study. And he came away with the view that, yeah, there's definitely some type of technology that we're not familiar with. And the other thing is radar a scientific instrument? Well, of course it is. And how many cases do we have where you have not one, not two, not three radar sightings, but you have a half a dozen all confirming that there's an object in the sky, and then you have to rely on the pilot that's telling you what they're seeing in the quadrant of the sky where you told them to look. I mean, it makes me, I get frustrated when I hear that.
I know the feeling. I've been there.
Yeah, it's like, holy cow, are you serious? You know, come on. And well, radar makes if radar was that infallible, how come we're using it? How many planes are in the air at any given minute? Come on. I mean, I think we rely on radar and the sophistication of it. I mean, we do weather forecasting off of it. Our air traffic control is based on it. I think we got it down pretty good. So when the radar signal,
but it ain't perfect, man.
No, not at all. Absolutely, that's exactly right. Okay, and there's another case where, yep, it makes mistakes. That's a fact. So. Anyway, I just think that, well, let me ask you something, Stan. Why do you think academia is that way? Why are they so such a skeptic on the subject that they roll their eyes? And is it because of ridicule? They're afraid they're going to lose their funding, or what?
There's certainly some of them. There's fear of ridicule. When I ask my audiences at the end of my lectures, and I've done over more than 700 so far, I usually ask at the end, how many here believe they've seen what I would consider to be a flying saucer, having defined my terms earlier? Just raise your hand. I just point and count. And I'm not asking your names or anything. And typically it's 10% of the audience, much to their surprise. And then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. Anybody left? How many of you were in the military at the time? And you want to tell us about it? A guy in front of 1,300 in Texas says, I can't. They told me not to say anything, which was a great line.
Oh, yeah.
So,
right.
The interest is there. The fear of ridicule is there. The academics also don't want to be bothered with the nitty-gritty kind of stuff. And they don't seem to... I've got academics who don't seem to think governments can keep secrets.
Oh, really?
Oh, today with the internet and YouTube, you can't keep anything secret, Stan. Oh, really? How come Lockheed was able to spend $10 billion developing a stealth aircraft in secret?
Right.
How come our first spy satellite, the Corona spy satellite, love the name, and I'm sure it wasn't named after the little town in New Mexico.
or the beer.
Well, they had 12 failures in secret. The 13th one worked and got more data on Soviet military construction than all the U-2 flights that had preceded it. And yet it was kept secret for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
What I loved about the Corona, the thing that really caught my attention, you know how they got the film back? They deorbited the film canisters, and they were picked up by airplanes flying over the Pacific.
Oh, wow.
Put out the net, guys. Here it comes.
Oh, wow. Stan,
there's some high tech for you.
Stan, we're getting close to the end of time. We got to let you rest, but we have one question in chat if you don't mind asking. or me asking the question. This is from Neutron, retyped by Jim Bob Shorter, buddy. Question for Stanton: did you ever research the story and documents available at the Canadian National Archives on Canadian UFO researcher Wilbert Smith and Project Magnet in the 40s? By the way, I can tell you the magnets he used to try to pull the UFOs are still down in the concrete floor of one of the buildings today at Shirley's Bay.
Shirley Bay, yeah. Yeah, I've been at the Canadian Files, and I was very glad to look at some of that stuff. And I admire Wilbur Smith. I don't degrade him, as some people want to. He was interested in crazy stuff, big deal. So am I. Yeah, the Canadian Files were... I spent more time there early on than in some of the U.S. files. I've been to 20 archives, and fortunately I was able to get some financial support to go to some of them. Because, I live on the eastern end of Canada, and stuff isn't close. But, yeah, the Canadian archives are worthwhile places. The Eisenhower Library, I love archivists. And they keep you from getting into trouble with foolish things. And I check with them. I ask them questions, and they're very helpful about, this business of, rank. I asked two different archivists. I said, does it bother you? I said, no, it's standard practice to use the general or admiral rather than the rear admiral or brigadier general or whatever. Standard practice. They said Ike used it. So I looked up in some of the books, and sure enough. And I looked at meeting notes from Ike's staff secretary, a general who called himself general, even though he was only a brigadier general. He signed brigadier general. But these guys can be very helpful. Give them a chance. Ask for elucidation of things, if you will. And so I like archives, and I like documents. That's the physicist in me, I guess. And the fact that I had a clearance for 14 years. So, and when somebody tells me, well, they never would have done it that way, and date format on some of the MJ-12 stuff. And I have one folder from the Eisenhower Library that had 7 different date formats in it. And I get guys telling me, well, they only use this one. Well, it's not true. And so that's why I like to ask archivists, and they're helpful. They're people you respect for their knowledge and experience. And they're not grinding an axe, and I'm not grinding an axe. I want to get the facts. Yeah. And hey, I'm a poet who didn't know it.
There you go.
Sorry.
That's great, Stan. Stan, I'll let our listeners know if you have any upcoming conferences or events or books, or tell them where your books, or to get your books and your website.
The thing to do is to go to my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, and it lists all my books. It tells you how to get them, and you can use PayPal and PAL. And one thing you get from me that you don't get from Amazon is that I autograph all the things I send out. So, personally, I don't have an artificial artist doing it. But it also lists my scheduled events. I will be... I do have some coming up. Roswell was a great success this year, incidentally. I'm very pleased about that. But I'll be... look at the website. It'll give you dates. And I'm easy to find. I don't hide. And I do respond to questions. I don't usually give out my telephone number over the air on the radio, because then I get calls at bad times.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Somebody wants to call me. On the radio. Well, you gave your number. I'm going to call you.
Yeah. Perfect.
So I am still. I will be going on the MUFON cruise, incidentally, in early January from Tampa to Cozumel and down that way, about 5 days, and several speakers on UFOs.
Right on.
How's that? that's a different event.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it because, frankly, at that time of year, it's kind of cold up here.
Hell yeah.
Oh, I bet.
For sure.
And I just as soon get where it's warmer. And,
I hear you that.
So I'm still going strong.
Good. Good.
I don't have another book in my typewriter, but the last one came out in September. It was Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers with Kathleen Marden, Betty Hill's.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I have specials that you'll see on the website. Our book Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, and another book that fits in this discussion is Science Was Wrong. 14 chapters. We each did 7, each stimulated by some very smart person saying something stupid. I'm absolutely certain man will never fly any distance in a vehicle, said Simon Newcomb, the great astronomer in the United States. And
we'll never break the sound barrier.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Oh, space travel is utter bilge, said the British astronomer Royal in 1956.
God dang.
And you know, there's something to be learned. There's a price to pay for paying attention to people who don't know what they're talking about.
Amen.
People who died of smallpox because, well, vaccination won't do any good. Sure. You know,
right.
So you got to be real careful that people are dealing with a straight deck and not just their own, if I don't know, it doesn't exist, you know, kind of attitude.
Right.
So there are lessons to be learned. That's why that book. And then, of course, there's my book, Crash at Corona, the definitive study of the Roswell incident. And, Flying Saucers in Science, which covers the waterfront. And I got a third one out there. Top Secret Majic, yes, the story, the MJ-12 story. And, there's a lot of data out there. And I was looking, I noticed in the Top Secret Majic, I listed 10 PhD theses on UFOs. And I've never seen that list in a book. For people who say, well, there isn't any data, well, check it out, folks. There's a lot of data.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well,
and so, I always make comments about astronomers, and that SETI stands for Silly Effort to Investigate.
I was waiting for that one, yeah.
They have demonstrated their ignorance. When you give pronouncements without having facts to back them up, I mean, they don't know anything about government security, generally, that governments can't keep secrets. They don't know anything about interstellar travel. I've worked on more government canceled programs than you can shake a stick at. But there's another part of that. Astronomers don't think big. The big universe is big, but they don't think big. But one example of that is that they don't realize the size of the budgets. When I was working on nuclear airplanes, General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, it wasn't a black project. That was the name on the door. Between 56 and 59, our budget in 1958 was $100 million. We employed 3,400 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. We're not talking about 6 professors and 20 grad students.
Right.
Programs cost money. Like it or not. You want to build something, it's going to cost a lot of dough. What'd you say that aircraft carrier cost?
$13 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. Imagine if you had that for your research.
Yeah, you get the idea. What I'm saying is, if you want to get something done, it's going to cost you. And I'm not saying governments don't waste money, but I'm saying when they put their mind to it, they can get a lot of accomplishment there, too.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the academic community knows nothing about it. That's what bugs me. They think research is only what's done in academia. Sorry.
Right.
Not so.
Right.
And, people think you're always looking for a fight, Friedman. Well, 700 plus lectures, and I've only had 11 hecklers, and 2 of them were drunk. And you'll get that many if you talk about sports, religion, politics.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You are
right.
correct.
That's exactly right.
So it's not surprising. And the thing is, I find most people are respectful, responsive, sensible. Yeah. the usual response when you refute their argument is, "Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way." Well, okay, why should you? I've spent half a lifetime anyway. Thinking about these things.
Right.
So, of course, and when you're on the stage after a lecture, you can't say, "I'll give you the answer to that question tomorrow."
Right.
You have to be ready for it now.
Right.
And so the audience appreciates that. Keep your cool.
Right.
And they'll take care of the the nasty, noisy negativists.
Oh, right,
and
right.
We're talking human nature here. If a person has taken a strong stand publicly, and is in total error, he doesn't want to admit that, really, if he can avoid it. That's human nature.
Sure.
Sure.
So, and also, there are other forces at work. The religious forces, the political one. You heard some of that with President Trump now. People pointing out, there's a lot of things that aren't true that are being said.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's a fact.
So, there's no... The fact checkers aren't always working on what government guys say, guys.
Well, Stan, thanks for coming on. It's been amazing, and I really appreciate what you do for the field, and you're keeping it real, and you're still going, and it's a great thing, Stan. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll have you back, and maybe early next year sometime if you wouldn't mind coming back on.
Why not?
Oh,
Why
I'd love
not?
to.
I enjoy. I grew up with radio, guys.
Uh-huh.
I'll be 83 next week. I grew up with radio, not television.
I love it. That's great. Oh, yeah. Keep it up. You betcha.
Thanks.
Yep.
Have fun, guys.
Yes.
Hey, you too.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Stan.
much.
Thank you.
All
right.
Bye. Well, there you go, Ken, the legend himself, the king of ufology, Stanton Friedman.
He's got a great sense of humor, and wow, he's a wealth of information.
He definitely is, and we gave you all some bonus coverage tonight, because I'm the boss, and we just kind of did that. Well, thanks for everybody for coming on. We're working on a few guests here before we hit the John Ford UFO Nightmare, which the next episode would be August 13th, 9 p.m. Eastern. But hang in there, everybody. We'll work on some new guests. If you have suggestions for guests, you can always send them to pangradio@gmail.com. We'll definitely go through it. And everybody have a great week. And don't forget to pang your head and
keep at least one eye to the sky.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks for listening.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million. What color is the White House?
I know this.